Hey, what's good, everybody? Back again. So today's video, it's a continuation of a constant theme that I've been working on, and it's called the prominence of sex scandals in politics. So I don't think people really understand. Really, they don't. You know, certain things get into the media, right? Like the Jeffrey Epstein thing. They try to hide that forever. It's been going on 3 or 4 decades, right? And his MO and everything that he was doing, you know, it was basically, you know, Ghislaine Maxwell was like the middleman between Epstein. She was one level up from him, right? Her father, Robert Maxwell, was MI6, Mossad, and possibly, you know, double, triple agent for the Russians, and who knows all. But, you know, mainly it's a blackmail operation. And I referenced in my previous video how, you know, people like Ian Fleming and Aleister Crowley were doing the same op, you know, and most people don't study it. There's a lot of crappy coverage of these issues, right? Like a lot of people have heard of these people, Ian Fleming, James Bond, Aleister Crowley. Like these are big names that get thrown around, but people do not tend to research and do the real due diligence and see the threads of continuity that go all the way back, you know, 1,000 years back to the Knights Templar and 5,000 years back to the sex cults of ancient Egypt and Babylon. This is deep, okay? And it's not just in these cultures, Middle Eastern cultures either, right? There were sex cults in ancient China. You know, the Taoists would have sex rituals. And really, that's the only way that the upper class can keep from becoming so inbred and have so many deleterious recessive genes that they're dysfunctional. Like Queen Elizabeth's family, you know, most of them are deformed, mentally ill, and in a hospital. Like, she's the only one that came out without severe physical and mental deformities, right? Because of inbreeding, right? So they have to have these like sex cults for thousands of years. This is the way it works, you know, to back cross themselves with normal humans, you know. You know, as a seed breeder and a plant breeder, like I know how this works. Like everyone's always trying to breed new varietals, right? But these hybrids, you know, they become genetically unstable, and often after a generation or two, they start to decay and they won't be able to produce functional offspring, so to speak. And you know, this is commonly known to someone who studies these things, but most people don't. Right, but so there we already see one connection between the sex scandals and politics, because the nobility, right, they're obsessed with breeding. Okay, people don't want to admit that Freemasonry is a sex cult, but it is. I could give you 1.5 million proofs of that, but you know, some people say the G stands for generative organs or genitalia, which is not too far off the mark, right? The square and compass is, you know, a man's legs and a woman's legs, and the G is the G spot. It's really profane, but that's really what it's about. And you know, they didn't really originate that. Like I said, it goes back to ancient Babylon, and I could get into all how Masonry is the cult of Babylon. That's why they have the golden calf and the Temple of Solomon and all their things, right? But Solomon was copying the Temple of Hiram of Tyre. It says it right in the Bible, because they didn't have any lumber. They had to go to Hiram. He was the only one that had big trees in the Middle East. You know, Egypt don't have no fucking trees. They got palm trees, but they're not really suitable for that type of construction. But anyway, it's getting a little off the mark, but let's talk about sex cults and how they're working in the media. It's interesting to me how certain sex scandals are on every paper. Like when we had Stormy Daniels, right? That was everywhere. Everyone was going after Trump and nothing came out of it. I'm not going to comment on that particularly, but look at that one, how far that one went. You know, versus the 5 or 6 women that Bill Clinton raped that showed up at the debates, right? That was never covered. That was never picked up, right? Certain people get a pass. All these CNN people got a pass with all their stuff forever. You know, Governor Cuomo got a pass forever, decades. Bill Cosby got away with it for decades. Epstein got away with it for decades. So, I mean, the blackmail angle is obvious, right? If you get someone to do something scandalous, you can hold that over their head and blackmail them, right? But it goes way, way deeper than that, okay? And I'm kind of interspersing this video in. I was intending to make a detailed scientific video about the endocrine system, right? And everyone wants to talk about the pineal gland, DMT, all this Joe Rogan bullshit. Okay, but the fact of the matter is, DMT was popularized by the Masons, right? The Scottish Rite of Freemasonry funded Rick Strassman to do his research for the God part, or what is it called? You know, the God molecule, or whatever his big book was. I forget the exact title. But Joe Rogan made a movie about it all, and DMT, this and that. It's a date rape drug, okay? That's what's going on in the Amazon. That's what the Masons were doing. Like, they didn't get it from the Banisteria. They didn't get it from ayahuasca. They got it from the Acacia tree in ancient Egypt. You know, the same tree that the Ark of the Covenant's made out of. It's well known in Masonic ritual. And they use that for trauma induction, you know, and homosexual sodomy, you know. That's the rite. That's the initiation ritual. That's the big eye in the triangle. You know, it's people are not ready. They want to deny it all, but it's factual. And I mean, I've done decades of research. It took me a long time to really figure it out, and more so to admit it to myself, because I didn't want to believe that, right? But yeah, it's pretty gross. It's a big sex cult, right? So, like I was saying, the endocrine system this is their big secret. Everyone talks about the pineal gland, but it's the whole endocrine system, you know, the pituitary gland, hypothalamus, and your thyroid gland and thymus gland and adrenal gland and your ovaries and testicles. All these glands, right? They secrete hormones, these very, very powerful chemicals that are super powerful in tiny amounts, right? And, you know, if you look at the history of all this, it's a big thing to corrupt this force and to control it and to get everyone mentally engaged with non-procreative, obsessive forms of sexuality that do not produce viable offspring or a happy family or a stable society. They destroy all of those things. People don't want to admit that because our whole culture is based on lust, using lust to sell products. Every movie star, every rock star is, you know, I hate to say it, but people do not want to acknowledge the fact that all the actors and actresses are prostitutes, okay? Sylvester Stallone was a gay porn star, okay? Hello. Same with, what's the Saturday Night Fever? What's his name? John Travolta. He came out and made a big controversial statement. It's funny how once their careers are all washed up, then they come out and talk about it, right? Like Uma Thurman, once she couldn't make any more money, she was like, oh yeah, I knew Harvey Weinstein was a crazy rapist and everything. And Quentin Tarantino, like once her career was over, she came out and said it. Same with Rose McGowan, and same with, you know, all these people. And John Travolta, once he couldn't make money anymore and he wasn't young and handsome anymore, he came out and said, yeah, I got all my roles by sucking Jewish cock in Hollywood. Like, he admitted it, okay? But and I know that's all gross, and I hate to talk about that, but the reason why this is so powerful and why this is controlling all the political figures is because no one will talk about it, okay? It's a taboo subject that everyone wants to do in private, and that's a big part of it, is connecting sexuality and shame, right? Not having a healthy sexuality that produces a stable family and good, long-lasting, like deep emotional relationships. It's about lust and creating sexuality as a product and as a subject of shame, okay? And this goes back to the Sabbateans, right? The Sabbateans in 1666, this guy Shabbatai Zvi was a Jewish rabbi, right? And people have no idea. So he basically flipped all the commandments around, and he says that it's good to sin. To bring the Messiah back, everyone has to get into real sin and violate all the mitzvahs and violate all the commandments in the Bible and do all this evil ass shit. And it sounds crazy, okay, but at that time, a massive fraction of the Jewish population of the world in 1666 were followers of this guy, and they believed he was the Messiah, okay? And basically, this is where we get the Sabbateans, you know, where Satanism and Saturnism tend to come from this guy. And this has been a massively influential force, not only on the United States. All Freemasonry comes out of this, okay? People don't want to admit it. The so-called Illuminati, they're all Sabbateans, or sometimes referred to as antinomians, right? So they reverse all the morality, and they create wickedness as a virtue in their minds. And this is where we get Hollywood. Okay, Hollywood started by a bunch of pornographers from New York City and Chicago mafia that came to Hollywood to get out of their copyright, lawsuits with Thomas Edison, who patented the kinetoscope, right? So they all came to Hollywood. And Hollywood, since its very inception, since the late 1800s and early 1900s, was synonymous with prostitution and drug abuse. And how many Hollywood people going back 100 and more years die of drug overdose and bizarre sex scandals and mental illness all around this kind of topic. You know, people do not want to address this. But why is this? Okay, think about why this is the case. As humans, you know, our divine creative link to God is through sexuality. That's how we create life, right? What's the first book of the Bible? The book of Genesis, the book of creation, right? That's our power. That's where we get in touch with the godlike status, right? And so it's through the cooperation of the male and the female, right? So if you want to enslave humanity, you have to corrupt that force, right? You have to corrupt and hijack everyone's creative power and get their imagination and their creativity all into porno and materialism. So you're using humanity's creative power against them. And so you use their creative power to enslave them. And they willfully choose and fantasize about slavery, and they fetishize materialism and slavery and a death cult. That's what Hollywood is, okay? People do not want to admit that, okay? Hollywood is there to create dark fantasies in people, make them all materialist slaves. They have to pay all this money and work and work and work to buy useless crap that was made by slaves in China and Korea, you know. So it's propagating slavery, and it's get everyone karmically entangled with slavery, okay? It's just like how the food industry works. Like, people have all these factory farms and they live eating, you know, chickens and pigs and cows that are treated in horrific ways like slaves and, like, you know, degraded beyond belief. And then they get surprised when they become slaves. It's karma. It really is. If you eat the blood and the meat of tortured animals, you know, it affects your endocrine system. You know, you're eating their terror hormones, right? You're eating their adrenalized blood, and it causes stress and it causes aging. And that's why the heart disease and heart problems are one of the leading causes of death, and hypertension. It's because people eating adrenalized blood from all these tortured animals. Hello. But no one wants to talk about basic science of how our body works, right? Joe Rogan can go talk about the pineal gland, right? And some people will talk about adrenochrome and stuff like that. You know, and this is why, you know, if you go pick up these really like rabbinical books of the Torah and the Bible, they have all these diagrams of how to carve up animals and take out their organs, right? And back in the day, they would say all fat is the Lord's, right? Everyone would have to go give the priests all the fat of their animals. So the priests would have big brains, you know, their brains would be well developed, and all the slaves were eating wheat and corn and kamut and rice and stuff like that. So they don't have a developed brain and nervous system. Only the priest caste and the politicians and the warlords have the good brains, right? But my point is, it's all about sacrifice, human and animal sacrifice. All the major religions of the world, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are all based on animal sacrifice. They're also based on pedophilia, right? No one wants to admit that. With Islam, it's really obvious. Like, they don't try to hide it that much. It's in the Quran about how Muhammad married a 9-year-old and stuff like that. You know, and how Muslims are running rape gangs and pedophilia gangs all throughout Europe, and they're taking over the police forces. I mean, people, this is not told in the news, but people know. There's certain people that talk about it and know about it and try to spread the word about it. But this is all, it's a human sacrifice cult, and it's a sex cult, right? And so they're conscripting your power, your internal power, and your hormones are enslaved to their dark fantasies that they propagate through Hollywood. And they're using your own body and the power within you against you, right? But this knowledge exists. You know, you can flip it around, and you can use your own creative power and healthy love and healthy sexuality between a man and a woman. Okay, there's a reason why that all is. You know, electricity has a plus and a minus, and it's the same way with us. The way that humans reach their peak potential and create and obtain their godlike creative powers is through the cooperation and harmony of the male and female. And look how that is being destroyed on every front in our culture, okay? So many people are on birth control pills. All the landfills and all the sewers in the groundwater is full of estrogen from people's birth control that they throw away. It's estrogenizing everybody, okay? Even the shrimps and the little fish and frogs are getting estrogenized, right? And there's estrogen mimicking. All the soy, unfermented soy products have xenoestrogens. It's a big problem, and it all revolves around this sex cult. So you need to think about it.